Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
Be careful what you wish for. Back in the 1800s, folks wished for a plant that would control erosion. Well, they got it.
But today, control is not a word we associate with kudzu. Kudzu has become another term for out of control. It climbs. It clings. It runs across the Alabama landscape, devouring everything in its path. And unfortunately, kudzu is now just one of many alien invaders. There was a time we thought they were here to help. With their bright colors and fragrant aromas, we thought we could put them to work in the garden. We thought they could help us control erosion along the road banks. In many cases, we invited them in. And now, these invasive plant species have established a foothold, and they are refusing to let go.
Hi, I'm Doug Phillips. Since 1985, we've been bringing you the many native natural wonders of Alabama. Today, we're going to bring you some wonders that maybe we're not so crazy about.
Alien Invaders. They steadily march across the Alabama landscape, subdue the natives, and establish themselves as the new order. Millions in state and federal dollars are spent each year trying to bring the invaders under control, trying to keep these aliens from conquering yet more of our precious native lands.
Join me as we examine the growing problem of invasive plant species, the threats they pose, and how we can control them. Or perhaps I should say, can we control them?
This program is about a land unknown to many people, a land that in many ways has maintained its native natural wonders, a place of bountiful backcountry, forests, streams, and wildlife more diverse than can be found in much of the inhabited world. Come along with me as we explore the wild wonders of this land. Come along as we discover Alabama.
Welcome to Discovering Alabama. And welcome to, let's see, we should be able to look at the flora in the area and get a pretty good idea where we are in the state. This looks like Chinese privet, so we could be in Madison County, up in North Alabama. And here we have Japanese honeysuckle. I guess that means we could be over around Dothan in the wiregrass region. A mimosa tree, another fragrant visitor from Asia. We could be anywhere on Highway 280 between Birmingham and Auburn.
Or Highway 82 between Tuscaloosa and Montgomery. Highway 72 up in the Tennessee Valley. Highway 29 down in Lower Alabama.
You know, I've spent a lifetime exploring the wild wonders of our state, and given Alabama's rich geological and biological diversity, I've always felt I could tell where I was in the state by observing the terrain and the flora of an area.
The native landscapes of Alabama embody a grand natural heritage. Great forests of native hardwoods, endless vistas of native pines, expansive prairie lands of native flora, mighty rivers, mysterious wetlands, alluring coastlands, all rich with native natural beauty and abundance.
Today, Alabama's rich native natural beauty and abundance is under attack, under threat, under direct assault by alien invaders.
From across the globe they come, Europe, Africa, Asia, South America. They find fertile ground here in the Southland. Many grab hold, and they refuse to let go. We're talking about non-native invasive plant species. There are invasive animal species. Fire ants are perhaps the most insidious example of a non-native invasive animal.
But today we'll be looking at the plants, and we'll have plenty to see. We'll start with some simple definitions.
Well, what we have with invasive species is a situation where in a native area, you have species that have evolved together over millions of years. There are competitors and predators that have worked out a relationship for success, or they wouldn't be here. When invasive species come in, they are without their native predators, without their native competitors, and they clearly outcompete the natives. And invasive species are the second leading cause of endangerment for species across the world, habitat destruction being number one.
Simply put, an invasive plant is one that escapes into our natural areas and aggressively replaces native plants. A word often associated with invasive is exotic.
Well, exotic just means that it comes from another country or as an introduced sort of situation rather than being indigenous or native to the U.S. The majority of our difficult invasive species are actually introduced species, and again, to a large extent because the natural controls for them were not introduced along with them.
Being an exotic species doesn't necessarily mean a plant is invasive. Many, perhaps most, of our agricultural crops in the state are exotics. Cotton, potatoes, peanuts, and soybeans, to name but a few, are examples of plants that were brought here from outside of North America. Johnny Appleseed became a folk hero by spreading the non-native apple across the fruited plain. Exotic plants become a problem when they escape cultivation and overwhelm the native landscape.
A plant species doesn't have to be exotic to be considered invasive. Across the U.S., a number of Native American plant species can dominate the landscape to the point of being considered invasive. But in Alabama, most of the problem species are, in fact,
Alien Invaders. They invade from across the globe. Kogan grass from the Philippines, alligator weed from South America, English ivy, Japanese climbing fern, Chinese privet, and on and on and on it goes. They come by air, they come by sea, they march across the land.
So, how did they get here? How did we get to the point that so much of our native landscape is being overrun by aliens? Well, here's where it begins to get complicated.
All of these invasive species that we have today came here because of human activity. And many of them, unfortunately, most of them are here to stay. But we can be careful in the future. There's more species waiting to come here, so to speak. And if this is a war, we're going to have to maintain some areas where they don't get in, a demilitarized zone, if you will.
These aliens came to our shores for a variety of reasons by a variety of methods. But the methods have one thing in common. We were complicit. Either we invited them directly in, or at the very least, we opened the door.
For example, we thought privet would make a good hedgerow, and it does. Did we have any idea it would escape the yard and begin to crowd out our natives? Privet hitches a ride with birds and readily finds a new home wherever birds drop it. It grows in the shade, which makes it ideal under the eaves of your house. But in the forest? In the forest it grows beneath the canopy of native trees, choking out the understory, including any young trees. As the older trees die out, they leave behind non-native invasives. As the forest goes, so go the critters that call the forest home.
For example, the gopher tortoise, a species very near and dear to my heart. It's what we ecologists call a keystone species. It is very important to a lot of other species that take refuge in its burrow. Gopher tortoises are being displaced all over the South. If we lose the gopher tortoise, we run the risk of losing many other species. So there's a real concern there that these invasive species are going to have a much bigger impact than anybody could imagine.
As for us, well, hiking in the Alabama backcountry would take on a whole new challenge if that backcountry were dominated by privet. Chinese privet and Kogan grass are just a couple of examples of how these aliens can overrun our native lands. There are many, many, many more. Almost everything we see in the water here in this section of the lower Tombigbee is an exotic invasive. Many escaped from home aquariums. Others sneaked in on the hulls of container ships and barges. Now they hitchhike from river to river, from lake to lake, on our boats and trailer hitches. This is what it should look like. Quite a contrast from what it does look like when the aliens have their way.
They attack our lands, they attack our waters. But hey, can't we all just get along?
No. It's potentially a sad picture for not just where we live, but the world. I mean, I hate to say this, but after studying this for most of my career, we have the potential for species diversity on the face of the earth to go down because that we're living in a global village now. We move everything around, so it's hard to stop this from happening.
That great, lush environment that I came to work in as a biologist, if we don't address it now, it won't be here 30, 40, 50 years from now. And it's going to take away the environment that you grew up with, that a lot of Alabamians grew up with. It's going to be lush, full of invasives, and nowhere in there does that say United States of America. Unless we address it now and think about it for our future generations, it won't be what it has been.
If we surrender to these aliens, it's more than the beauty of our Alabama wonder world we'll lose. It's dollars, millions, billions of dollars.
Invasive plants subtract from the economy of the United States about $36 billion a year in control and losses. And it's spreading at thousands of acres a year. And so the problem is compounded at an ever-increasing rate year after year. It's an explosive state right now, and that's why I think we've been so caught off guard.
Your tax money is presently having to be spent for the control of invasives on public lands, right-of-ways. The cost of the goods that you buy will be impacted. Not to mention, there's a lot of recreational land use that has been impacted, and those landowners have lost income. And when you get into the materials or products that you buy that are impacted, as a citizen of Alabama, you're affected in several different ways.
Farming, hunting, fishing, hiking, bird watching, camping. Our very way of life is under attack by these insidious invasives. Fortunately, there are those brave souls taking the battle to the alien invaders.
The Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is fighting to keep the woods and waters open for our enjoyment. Meanwhile, across Alabama, the war rages. A privet roundup at the Hayes Nature Preserve in Huntsville brings volunteers together to fight the good fight.
Called a weed wrench.
Magnificent Monte Sano Mountain is under attack, but intrepid volunteers do battle.
The kids out here today are getting rid of honeysuckle. Well, it started out in the late 1800s as a landscape plant, and people planted it because it had pretty white flowers that smelled good, and it's an Asiatic honeysuckle and it has no natural enemies. And what happened is it just started encroaching from people's yards up into the forest interior, and it's crowding out new growth for tree seedlings and herbaceous plants, and it's just, there's nothing left but honeysuckle.
Now what you want to do? Right now we call this the Minutemen, Minutewoman era of invasive plants. So there's no federal army that's going to come to your aid as this invasion goes on. There's no state militia that's going to come to you as a landowner or land manager. It's more or less take up arms, defend your land, and preserve it as best we can. And that's going on.
I wish I could say that we'd found an easy way to do this, but it's a matter of getting out there and doing it. And it's, you know, hands-on, on the ground, carrying the sprayers and wearing the backpack sprayer and doing a lot of walking. Because of the setting we are in, and we're not restoring this entire watershed, wouldn't that be wonderful? We have this segment within this several mile long watershed that we're working on. And if we walked away from it today and we came back in 5 years or 10 years, it would probably have reverted back very close to how it was when we started.
Along the highways and byways, alien invaders seek a foothold while cities, counties, and the state stand firm.
It's important to me in my work at ALDOT because we have a number of those invasive plants are on our right-of-ways. They increase our maintenance cost. One in particular creates a tremendous fire hazard.
Across Alabama, the battle is on, and we ain't going down without a fight. There's just too much at stake. Men, women, and children from all walks of life are rallying to the cause.
Groups like the Alabama Vegetation Management Society and the Alabama Invasive Plant Council are among the strongest such organizations in the country. They rally the troops and plot strategies for victory. Foresters, farmers, university professors, land managers, state and local administrators, they know the battle lines are drawn. And as they plot their strategies, what is their number one goal?
I think one of the biggest issues or hurdles the council has is how do we educate the public. We have amazing people right now that sit on the council with vast amounts of knowledge of what the plants are, how we control them, what we need to do. But with the everyday landowner, they need to be able to get a hold of this information, know where to go for it, to get the information, and know what to do with it. And that's a huge hurdle.
Education is extremely important. We've got to get people to understand that these pretty plants that they put in their landscape, birds and other animals may take them over to their neighbor. And we don't want to get into finger pointing, the nursery industry or anyone else, agricultural seed movement. It really won't serve much purpose to get into a finger pointing, but we just need to educate people as to how these plants move around, how they get here, and how we can stop it.
No doubt the most daunting challenge in the war against alien invaders is educating you and me. For while the evils of invasive species are well established, we're still inviting them in.
We invite them to decorate our yards, and they take up residence along our roads, in our fields, among our forests. We open the door for them to beautify our homes, and they choke the life out of our native natural beauty. We believe we can put them to work for us, but they seize control.
In the short time we've had today, we've barely scratched the surface of the problem of invasive plants. The few we've mentioned are but the tip of the iceberg. There are always more, ever more, looming on the horizon.
Tropical soda apple, for instance, has already cost the state of Florida millions. Can we get a handle on it before it slashes into the productivity of Alabama? Biologists battle alligator weed, hydrilla, water milfoil, and water hyacinth. Meanwhile, Cuban grass, a new villain, slips in. Is there no end?
I think we all realize that this is something that we'll never conquer 100%. But, you know, you think about what you're going to leave behind for your kids, your grandkids, and you want to leave them as clean a slate as you can.
It's going to take years upon years for this program to be considered successful. Until we educate our neighbors and the community and to the extent of the problem, it'll be a continuous battle forever.
What I would hope we could do is that we can start recognizing this invasive potential of some plants, and when we see them come into an area, stop them then. Don't let them get any worse. But unless we recognize the invasive potential, and we continue to, to plant things, we're never going to stop them. But I'm hoping that our children, our grandchildren will be much more aware. So just hope people will start listening, and I hope we can get that message out.
Well, sometimes I look around me in certain parts of Mobile County and Baldwin County, and I kind of feel like it's a losing battle and it's a lost cause, and why are we even trying? But I'm not ready to give up the fight. I think that what we have is too precious.
Science tells us that the health of our native natural systems is vital to the health of our economy and to our environment, vital to our own health and well-being. Common sense tells us that perpetuating Alabama's unique natural heritage is important to our future. Our hearts tell us that these native natural values are part of how we live, part of who we are.
There's a combination of history and ecology. Both of those factors result in what species we see in an area today. And when you have species that are coming in, then again, you sort of offset the balance, if you will, and that has ramifications.
Ramifications indeed. Ramifications for the forest, ramifications for the wetlands, for the fish and the fishermen, for the fields and the farmers. Ramifications for you and me. Certainly, we wish for economic prosperity in the global market. But let's be careful what we wish for, because inviting the world to share in our natural beauty and abundance begs the question: will we invite the world to dominate our grand natural heritage?
The world today is changing in many ways. Our local economy is now interwoven with the world economy. But like the native natural wonders of our state, we find our sense of place here in Alabama.
Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History, the University of Alabama. This program is supported by grants from the Solon and Martha Dixon Foundation, the Alabama Wildlife Federation, working for wildlife since 1935, the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, State Lands Division,